We interrupt this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio, and I'm damn glad that you are. Today, this is exciting for me because now instead of ending the biggest talk radio day on Damn Radio, which is Wednesday, I get to start it, which means I'm setting the tone, friends and neighbors, and the tone is going to be pretty good today. So Wednesdays are huge for us. We have me, International Flavor, 7:30 to 9. 9 to 10, we got the Damn Swag. 10 to 11, we have Gabby Hayes' show. 2 to 4, JR. JR has no really big show today. There's something very exciting going on, and I'm involved in it too, but I ain't going to talk about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow, I believe, but it's an exciting development both locally and statewide, and I don't want to say deeply involved, but I'm certainly part of the entourage. Let's put it that way, and it's going to be really cool. 4 to 6, we have the SOS Search for Solutions. 6 to 8, Ike Skelton now gets to end the biggest day in radio, and I think that's very wonderful. I like listening to him. I'm still a bit under the weather today. I've been drugging up and plowing on for the last week, and but my throat's a little bit scratchy, so if I got to take a little break or so, we will definitely get that done. There's a lot of international stuff going on. One of the things that I definitely want to talk, by the way, if you want to call in, it's 573-746-8020. And I'd be happy to have you. I'm trying to do a little bit different format on the show here. I always have plenty to talk about, and I can ramble. But if you wish to interrupt me, please do, and I will attempt to do that. There's going to be plenty of content, but my main focus today is people never listen. And well, in America, we never get the truth anyway from the mainstream media and stuff like that. And they never tell you what the other side is saying for sure. So one of the things I like to do is listen to the other side. Listen to what's going on in Russia, what they're saying over there. One of my favorite shows, as many of you know, if you listen to me at all, is Solovyov. And Evenings with Solovyov, and Vladimir Solovyov. He's a very strong supporter of the Russian government, let's call it that. And but I like listening to him. And if you listen, and the format of his show is fantastic. I'd like to create a show like this over here, where you get 6 or 7. Well, he actually does his show is like every night. It's 2.5 to 3 hours, right? And so I like the Sunday one is usually kind of a bigger ticket one. There's a lot of topics that are discussed because a lot of people can't watch every night. But like me, you can only really watch once a week and get what they're doing. But I do try to listen to it on my talk radio and listen to what they're saying, and because I think it's important. And we never get that sort of discussion deep enough over here, in my humble opinion. Now, we do have some truth tellers out there. There's quite a few of them, and that are the truth tellers. I believe I'm one of them, and I don't. I also don't believe in sugarcoating stuff. I'm just not that way. And so, one of the things I like to do is listen to what they say. So I watched some Solovyov. There was a 3-hour deal that was last night. Well, for them, it was the show last night. Actually, would have come out for us about. By the time it's done, they show over there. I think his show is in the evenings, and so you get the feed to it I get it around 10 o'clock in the morning. And so if I can watch it and keep current, then I try to. And yesterday I was able to, but I'm always listening to it in the background, and I sometimes don't have the opportunity to get it full on, but I did yesterday. And so it was a good show. Also yesterday, there was a presser that was conducted with Vladimir Putin. Another one with Sergei Lavrov. I mean, it's a big talk over there, too. What is going on in the peace efforts, and Kushner and Witkoff have departed Moscow, and I give a little bit of that. But I wanted to go through some of what Vladimir Vladimirovich, that's Putin, has actually said in the discussion yesterday, because I think it's important. There's been, there's a city called Pokrovsk that's been the focus for a long time, over the couple of months at least. There's been an encirclement of Ukrainian forces. And when I first started talking about this a couple of months ago, it's a big city. It's a strategic hub that, guy named Gordon, last name of Gordon, who's a commentator in Ukraine, was talking about how important this city was. A year ago, 9 months ago, he was talking about, oh, geez, we can't lose this city. We can't do it. Now, he's, of course, backtracking and saying, oh, gee, it's not that important of a city. There's not much there. And so there was a presser with what Pokrovsk is. And Pokrovsk, the Russians have always called it Krasnoarmeysk. And Krasnoarmeysk is this city, and that's the name it was. Well, Ukraine was changing city names and all of that when they took over power, if you will, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and when there's also talks that they're developing nuclear weapons right now to have themselves with nuclear weapons, which is against the non-proliferation treaties of various types, and it's against the Budapest Accords. It's against a lot of things like that. But there's been some discussion of that. Don't know how truthful it is. Excuse me, but people have been talking about it. Ukraine wants to go back to being a nuclear power. Now, I think that's a huge mistake. They've lost half their population, and there's talks about the old Z monster not making it another. By mid-December, he'll be gone, is what's said, and certainly no later than December 31. The old Green Goblin will be gone, and now he's a Black Goblin because he always wears black now. And every once in a while, he wears a suit coat. But I wanted to go through the Putin discussions, especially on Krasnoarmeysk and Pokrovsk. There's a city right next to Pokrovsk. It's also it's kind of a big conglomeration. The two cities are maybe, 10 miles apart, maybe less. And the outskirts, that each of the suburbs run into each other. Mirnograd and Pokrovsk, and they're big cities, or pretty big cities, and pretty strategically important. And so they encircled, the Russians encircled both of these cities back 2 months ago and said, we got about 10,000 Ukrainians in there surrounded. Yesterday, the Ministry of Defense of Russia has declared that we now completely control Pokrovsk. There's been a couple of things all over Telegram that are showing. It's pretty funny because one of the shows that I watch, I went through a video that was posted by the Russians showing in the middle of Pokrovsk, there's I believe it's a university with the top of the building, and the two Russian guys are standing there with the flag, Russian flag, in the center of Pokrovsk, that they have taken the city, and the city is now in complete Russian control, and all of the Ukrainians have either been killed or captured. Very few escaped. Although Pokrovsk is on the western side, Mirnograd is now completely surrounded with Pokrovsk on the west, and then they're completely surrounded. And they say now back 2 months ago there were 5,000 soldiers there, and another 5 in the city of Pokrovsk is what they were saying. Well, now all the ones in Pokrovsk are destroyed, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, or captured or have retreated. But the city of Mirnograd to the east is now completely surrounded, and it's even worse in there. And so they've got all that's left in there now, according to the Russians, is 200. Now, what they did in Pokrovsk when the Russians took it over and showed that video I was telling you about, there's another video that is clearly AI generated and fake, which takes the 2 soldiers holding up the Russian flag and turns the flag into a Ukrainian flag. Now, there's several questions that brings up. If you've already held Pokrovsk, why in the world do you have to show that you've captured Pokrovsk is number one. Why do you have to show that you've got a video which is identical? The soldiers are identical. The only thing difference is the flag and a couple of other key points. So in the Russian video, you can see on the right, the one when they took over the city was geolocated and all of that stuff, and you can see a little part of a destroyed building that had collapsed from the university part, and because the Russians bombed the crap out of it before they went in, and it shows this thing. Well, in the AI generated version, it took that little they showed a part of the roof that had been blown off, and the part of the roof that was on the ground, the AI video turned it into a car traveling down the center of the street, as if traffic was still coming back and forth, and they showed some other cars in the background, and it was clearly an AI video. Well, that's what the Ukrainians are posting as proof that they still have Mirnograd, but it's identical to the Russian Telegram video, so it's pretty damn comical. So anyway, those are some of the backdrops for what has been discussed. And so I wanted to walk through the questions, and it shouldn't be too long, but I think it's important to say what other people, what the old Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is actually saying. So he gave a presser, and I want to walk you through it, kind of the question by question, because I believe it matters. And so Krasnoarmeysk and Pokrovsk, what he said, the first question was simple. You visited a command post and emphasized the seizure of Krasnoarmeysk, Pokrovsk. It is said to be fully controlled now by the Russian army. Why is this city so important? I think that question was staged, number one. He wanted to talk about this, and his answer isn't some vague patriotic, BS. He's got a cold, military response. He says basically, look, Krasnoarmeysk, which is also known as Pokrovsk, has been a priority target for both sides for a long time. Why? And he laid this out. He said it's a major infrastructure hub. And this is what Gordon and Aristovich on the Ukrainian side have been talking about for 9 months. And everybody knows this is a key city. I can't remember the population encirclement or capture, but I believe it was 60 to 100,000. It's a bigger, in the whole conglomeration with that in Mirnograd, I'm sure it's double that, but because it is a big hub, and they have done it. So he says it's a major infrastructure hub for road, rail, and logistics, and it's plugged into the communication network of the region. And he said, and most importantly, in military terms, it's a bridgehead. It's a Plattsdarm for them. And this platform that he calls it, the Russian forces can move in all directions. And the general staff says this is quite promising. This is what he says. In other words, the city for the Russians, well, for the Ukrainians too, is not about symbolism. It's about geography. It's about logistics. It's the kind of place you seize if you plan to drive deeper. And the Pokrovsk needed to be held by the Ukrainians. You want a sign of collapse, take the loss of Pokrovsk as a sign, or Krasnoarmeysk, as a big sign of the collapse of the Ukrainian entire front, because that was a strong logistics hub, and now they have nowhere. And now the next step is literally a huge bunch of fields and smaller places that the Russians have been churning up for the last year and a half. You know, they've been churning. It's going slowly. They're trying not to destroy everything, but they're getting rid of any resistance in there. And the Ukrainian army is on its heels. There's no doubt about that. So he reminded everybody that this was one of the strongest fortified areas of the Ukrainian side in Donetsk. And now, according to the commander of the center group of forces, it is fully in Russian hands. This is what Putin reported yesterday. And why is he so insistent about this? Because he's pushing back against this messaging and against these fake videos that show the the Russian video that was taken in the center and turned it into Ukrainian flags and AI stuff. And Ukraine's been very good about that ever since the escalation back in 2022. They have been creating these videos, and he said, no. It's contested. You know, this is what he goes, the Ukrainians are all saying it's contested. It isn't contested. They're on their heels on the western edge of Pokrovsk, and the Russian commander of the center group of forces says they've pushed them out of this huge, critical Plattsdarm, this huge critical platform, and he says the Ukrainians say it's contested, but they are definitely exaggerating. And then he goes further. He says, if anyone doubts it, come and take a look. Now, he's been saying that for a while, because when 2 months ago, or a month and a half, when they had it encircled, and I said that he had offered any Western reporters. CNN reported yesterday that Ukraine is, they're still attacking. It's going pretty well over there. No, sorry, it's not. And he said, I already offered this to you. Come and have a look. If you want to get in, we'll guarantee your safety. We'll help you get there. We got them surrounded, both cities. He said this 6 or 8 weeks ago. Said, you want to come in, Western reporters, have a look? We'll get you there. Well, CNN is reporting, without going and taking a look, the same crap that Ukraine is pumping down their throats, these fake videos and stuff like that. Saying, Pokrovsk has not been seized, but it has. And so he repeated his offer to bring in foreign journalists or Ukrainian journalists into the city so they can see who actually controls it. And he said previously Kiev tried to threaten journalists who might go. That's why they didn't come, according to him. Now he says Kiev has nothing to do with it because the city is completely under Russian control. And he admits it is a dangerous front line, drones in the air, situation is not safe in the sense of civilian living there, but he points out that the Russian war correspondents are already working there, and they're broadcasting from there, and they're safe. And Russia is prepared to do what it can to protect any foreign reporter who's actually willing to report the situation on the ground. You guys want to sponsor me? I'll go over there. I'll fly over there to Pokrovsk right now. And, it'd have to be after this afternoon, but somebody send me the cash. I'll fly over there, and my visa's good. I'll get in, and I'll go over and I'll report to you from Pokrovsk. No problem. And I'll see who's lying and who's not. Now, I want a pretty good set of maybe we could visit a police department. They're also militarized these days. I could go in as a SWAT guy and just change it all to say press and get my Kevlar crap all going, because police departments aren't for peace anymore. They're not peace officers. They're militarized guys like that. And maybe some of you like that. I don't. I think this display of militaristic stuff by the police is just wrong. I've always felt that way. But in summary, the first answer to the question for any listener that's actually paying attention or listens to what Putin is saying, which is far more truthful, unfortunately, than anything you get here in the West. He says Russia is presenting Krasnoarmeysk and Pokrovsk as a decisive operational win and a launch pad for future push. And that is exactly the truth. And he is confident enough to make a claim again to say, come and see, just like he did when they had him encircled 6-8 weeks ago. So the second one is Kupiansk. Alexander, let's say, no, I'm sorry, that's the name of the reporter. Zelensky said recently that Russian troops are still in Kupiansk. What did he mean? And he this was kind of a half briefing, and he shrugged it off, and he goes, well, why don't you ask him? He says Kupiansk has been in Russian hands for weeks, not days. He says Russian leadership lives on another planet. He said they're constantly traveling, begging for money, detached from both economic reality and the front line reality. And then that's a political, response to say, geez, we're kicking the crap out of them. All they're doing is wandering around the planet begging for money. Yesterday, the old Z monster was in Ireland, and in Ireland he got $150 million. They say that the hell's his name, Zelensky, he was the guy that got fired by Zelensky as the commander in chief of the military when Siersky took over, whatever it was, 18 months, nearly 2 years ago, and he sent him to England to be the ambassador for Ukraine to England. Well, now people are saying, because they want to continue this, and now it's clear to the EU and NATO that they got to get rid of Zelensky because of all the corruption and everything that is going on. They got to get rid of him. So the talk is that they're pushing Zelensky, and Zelensky's in Kiev right now. And he's in Kiev meeting with people while Zelensky's out, begging for cash. And so he's out in Ireland, and the Ireland government gave him $150 million. So they're still pumping money down this rat hole, in this corrupt rat hole. And so Ireland sends this money. But meanwhile, Zelensky, who is the favorite of the CIA, according to everything that I've seen, is the favorite of the CIA in the West and the U.S., and especially England, to push him to be the next guy in charge of Ukraine. So what they're saying is that just wait, because now that Zelensky is over there, Zelensky will be gone by the end of the month, by the end of December, by the first of the year, he'll be gone. And guess who will be installed? Zelensky. And they will throw the old Zelensky back in there. He's a military guy. He was the one in charge. They say that he's the guy that masterminded, if you want to call it that, the destruction of Severny Potok 2, Nord Stream 2 up in the Baltic. When this all started, and Joe Biden was saying we'll take care of that, and then it happened to get done. I don't think he did it without U.S. intelligence. Anyway, I think there's some big stuff going on, plenty of big stuff. But not Zelensky. Putin went a level deeper. He said along the riverbank there's another settlement called Uzlovoye in the Kupiansk area, and he said there's 2,000 buildings in there, and there's active fighting. He says 600 to 650 of those structures are already under Russian control, and he says they plan to fully take Uzlovoye in the next few days. So that's another big city. And he says on top of that the Ukrainian group of 15 battalions is on the left bank of that river, and Russian troops have begun liquidation of that force. So Western coverage is talking about Kupiansk is contested, same as they talked about Pokrovsk, and the Russians are trying to advance. What he's saying is that there's always a picture where the urban area is already in Russia's hands. The surrounding settlements are being taken slowly and piece by piece, and the forward movement is progressing. And a large Ukrainian group is now the target of systematic destruction. These battalions that he says are on the other side of the river. You don't have to believe it. I don't care. You're allowed to be skeptical. But if you want to understand how Moscow thinks it's doing, you got to listen to them. This is how they're framing it. It's not holding on. We're not holding on and being pushed back, as they want to claim every time Zelensky picks up another 150 million. They want to talk about, we're not holding on. We're grinding down and we're destroying plenty of Ukrainians, and that's terrible. Then there was a question, third question with him was, where is Europe in the peace process? It appears that they have walked out. So he said, the actual question was, you're about to meet Steve Witkoff, who come to Moscow specifically for a meeting with you. Negotiations seem to be happening only through the American side. Why are the Europeans, absent? And he went into some pretty good diplomacy. His answer went like this. He said, first of all, Europe is not silent. They are deeply offended. He says they're offended at being excluded, but he insists that nobody actually excluded them, that they cut themselves off. And that's a big difference. And that's, over here, it's like, oh, gee, Putin won't negotiate, nobody will be there. But what he says is, no, we've asked them. We've said for years, meet with us, honor our position, or at least consider our position, because nobody ever does. They just want to steal Russian money and say that they're the bad guys, but nobody even talks to them. And that's what he is saying. He says nobody's excluded them. They have cut themselves off. He describes how Russia used to have close contact with a number of European leaders. Putin speaks German fluently. And he was stationed over there when he was a KGB guy years ago, and his German is fantastic. And so they could sit and discuss with Germany all kinds of stuff, the two biggest players. But that's absent. Everybody's absent, and he's talking about that. But he says they cut themselves off, and he describes how how it used to be. And he said that has been done at Europe's initiative, not Moscow's. The reason for that, he says, is that European elites have adopted the idea of Russia's strategic defeat. And they've built their policy around that fantasy world. But even now, he says, they know it is impossible for them to defeat Russia, strategically. It's not going to happen. They know it's impossible, but they are unable to admit it politically because of how bad they'll look, how bad they'll say. This is what he said, okay? I'm not, you can believe or disbelieve, but this is what he said. Then he laid out three steps of this, which are against Europe. He said they removed themselves from this process. They walked away from talks and can't complain now about being excluded. They sabotaged every peace attempt, including all of those under Trump, which have been numerous since Trump took office a year ago almost. And they have pounded this. Zelensky's against it. Every EU guy. France is against it right now. They're talking about sending troops over there. Seriously sending troops. People are blowing up Russian what they call them, shadow fleet. They're going in and attacking them. There have been 2 ships attacked, which I'm going to try to get to today. And I talked a little bit about one of them yesterday, but I have some more information on that, of what they attacked. But he says, first, they removed themselves. Second, they sabotaged peace attempts, including under Trump, and they interfered with them, worse, because they didn't like where the talks might lead. That Russia might be considered, a major superpower again. They don't want that. They need a strategic defeat. And he says they do not have any peace agenda. They have a war agenda. Even when they pretend to be adjusting their peace proposals, for example, Trump's plan, they keep adjusting. But those adjustments are just attempts to block talks by piling on conditions they absolutely know that Russia will reject. So the bottom line is, Europe's goal, as he sees it, is to force Russia to walk away from the table so they can say, look, the Russians don't want peace. This is what he said. And if Europe is ready to return to reality based on the actual situation on the ground, Russia will allow them at any time to come back into the process. So that's the Kremlin's version. I don't care if you believe it or not, but that's what he is saying. But it's a lot more specific than the cartoon version you get here in the West, that they don't say anything. They take one or two sentences of what Putin says, or take whatever they can do to turn it into a threat. That is exactly what they do. And so, the next question, Hungarian, excuse me, I'm dying over here. Hungarian Foreign Minister Szijjártó has warned that NATO's European wing is preparing to deploy troops, implying a serious risk of war with Russia. He said, "Are you prepared for war with NATO, with all of Europe?" And listen to this, because this is blunt and important. And this is why I like listening to him. He doesn't mince words either. Putin doesn't mince words. He gets in there and says exactly what he means to say. And maybe these questions are staged. I'm sure maybe they are. I don't know. But he knows the answers. But I believe he does what Trump does. Talks off the, it's easy to say something when you're not reading from a bunch of cue cards. When it's something that you believe, it's much easier to talk about. When it's something that you can back up, you already know it in your head. I mean, that's true. But if you got to come with some political statement and follow a line, you got to memorize something. And all of these people in the West, he says that's all they're doing. But his question is blunt. Is there going to be war with Europe? That's what everybody's afraid of, even on both sides of the planet. They're afraid of this escalation. So he repeats that Russia does not intend to fight Europe at all and never has. And he said he has said that 100 times. But then comes the second half. He says, and he's always been clear about this, if Europe if Europe decides to start a war with Russia, he says that Russia is ready right now for that. No mobilization panic, no long buildup. His line was, "We are ready." And we, if you want to, knock on the door. We're here, basically. And he stresses that this would not be like the current conflict in Ukraine. And this is also quite important. What he said was, this will not at all be like the current conflict in Ukraine. He says the operations in Ukraine have been surgical, they have been careful, and he explicitly lined out, this is, right now, this in Ukraine is not a war in the direct modern sense of the war. Think about that. And they have killed 1 million plus, some estimates 1.5 million Ukrainian military personnel. And he says this is a surgical, careful. They're not trying to kill people. They don't want to kill people. But he says in a real war with Europe, the way I took it would be more like World War II, where he warns it would escalate very quickly to a point where, in his words, there is no one left to negotiate with. Now that is a cold threat. Now that's a stark deterrent message, I say. It's aimed at these European idiots who are casually talking about throwing boots on the ground in Ukraine or peacekeeping forces like it's a, tabletop exercise, people playing a game of Risk and moving around, little pieces. He says, you escalate this beyond Ukraine, beyond what it is, and he called it specifically a proxy war. He said, right, everybody knows this is a proxy war with NATO right now, and you're killing Ukrainians, and we really didn't want to do that, but that's what we're doing. Pretty soon it will be a war with you, and that ends very badly for you, is what he says. Now, that, if you want to take as a threat, and you want to take that as what has been said by Vladimir Putin, that is exactly how he said it. But the important part is he says, we don't intend to fight them. We've been trying not to fight them. We've been trying to engage in diplomacy with them. They aren't listening. They keep escalating. They keep upping the ante. And he goes, if you keep on escalating, you're going to push it. Now, trust me, they said this for years and years before that. They said that. Sorry, excuse me. He said, you escalate that, you're in bad shape, and it ends well for you. I mean, ends poorly for you and well for us. Frankly, I think that is probably true. Everybody is saying that if Europe had to, without U.S. support, had to get ready to do something, they better get started if they think they have to. They're talking that by 2030 they want to be at war with Russia. And that's what they're planning. That's why everybody's talking about this 5% now, and not just Trump. You know, Trump's going, you know what? Up your own stuff. NATO, take your own stuff. I believe what Trump is doing is probably correct. You know, backing off on this a little bit, trying to finalize this between the only two that matter. And it's hard to say that Europe doesn't matter, but it's true. And Ukraine certainly doesn't matter, and certainly doesn't matter to the EU, or they'd stop killing them all. But that's what they're doing. You cannot defeat Russia on the ground in Ukraine. It's not going to happen. The only victory for you, Europe, Ukraine, is politically. That's it. I see some changes going on the stuff that I set up. I'm going to end it at the right time, you know. And I already had that set up, and I put in my Christmas song from my early exit, if you happen to be paying attention. So I already had it set to do exactly what needs to happen to be out of the studio. We're still making this up as we go along when we get out of here, but I've actually pondered it and set it up correctly, just so you know, those who are listening. At any rate, that was the Putin, not all of it, because there's a couple more questions. And they talked specifically, so there were 2 ships attacked. And he says it's, you know, everybody believes that it was done by Ukraine, or worse, may have involved France. Now, this is frightening, okay? Because he said that when Zelensky was in France a couple of days ago, he met with his best buddy, which is Macron, and that Macron put out after that and said that you don't have to worry about Russian economy for long. The Russian economy will collapse pretty soon. And right after that, there are 2 attacks on Shadow Fleet tankers. Okay, I told you about one of them yesterday. And he was asked, said, please comment on the attacks on tankers near the Turkish coast. Now, I've been to Istanbul. I love Istanbul. Istanbul is fantastic. The Bosphorus is right there. The straits that go through and connect Asia and Europe, basically. It's a beautiful city. And I really, I've been there 5-6 times now, and I like Istanbul. And heck, you could live there. It's expensive as hell, but European city like that. But it's huge. They have like 4 or 5 international airports. You can get from anywhere. It is a central hub for the world that is very, very significant. And the Straits of Bosphorus also. Anytime, day or night, huge ship tankers going through there, connecting Asia and Europe, and they come out of the Black Sea and they connect to the Mediterranean, and it's freaking beautiful to watch. And now Russian Shadow Fleet ships are being attacked near there. Okay, and so he was asked to comment about this, and he said he hasn't yet received all of the full details, but he knew the basics. And what has happened is these tankers were attacked in neutral waters, or those that are in the exclusive economic zones of a third country, in this case Turkey. They are not in Ukraine or Russian territorial waters. And so what he says this is piracy, pure and simple. And then he reminds everybody that Ukraine previously has tried, and with some success, hit Russian seaports. on the Black Sea. They've been attacking Crimea. They've been attacking Sevastopol. There's a couple other cities down there on the north edge of the Black Sea that they've been after. And they have all of these drone ships that Russia is constantly dealing with. They've tried to take out the long bridge between Russian mainland and Crimea on quite a few occasions. And he said Russia is going to respond with its own strikes, according to him, but they were more powerful and effective. Now this means, and he was pretty blunt about it. He goes, in the Black Sea and other places, they know when American or Western ships are coming, and they have destroyed several of them on their way to Odessa or whatever other port they pick on the Black. Usually it's only Odessa, and Russia is now that they have Pokrovsk, the next step would be Nikolaeva and Odessa, those two southern places. He was talking about that. So they are prepared for the escalation. They're also prepared for what Macron has been saying, to take out these other ships that might be coming to deliver ammunition, to deliver equipment to Ukraine. So, he says that these strikes that Russia has taken are far more surgical. They're focusing on ships carrying weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. Well, the ships attacked yesterday was carrying sunflower oil. And France is trying to take out the Russian economy. And how do you do that? You take away its ability to supply things in the sea. And you have to come up with other ways to track it. Or you destroy their rail yards. You destroy their infrastructure for the refinery of oil, stuff like that. And so he's talking about even secondary explosions. He said, but what's happening now with the attacks on civilian tankers in third countries and economic zones, he says this is piracy and not legitimate warfare. It's like terrorism. So what does he threaten to do? What does he say the answer of Russia will be? Is to expand the list of targets among Ukrainian port facilities and ships that are going into Ukrainian ports. He said he would consider, not as a promise, but consider retaliatory measures against ships from countries that are helping Ukraine carry out these attacks. And this is in response to Macron being an idiot. And Macron saying, we're going to destroy the Russian economy. The EU idiots saying that we're going to destroy the Russian economy. And how are we going to do that? We're going to attack Russian ships. Russian shipping, even on their shadow fleets. They're saying that that's what they're going to do. And what's Putin say? He says, well, we're going to take out some more Ukrainian port facilities, and we're going to consider retaliatory measures against ships from countries that are helping Ukraine. You're taking out third country ships that are carrying Russian produce or Russian products, and in economic zones of third-party countries. You're engaging in territory piracy, blowing up these ships or attacking them. Well, we're going to consider doing the same to you. And then the most radical option he named was to cut Ukraine off from the sea entirely. Now that is what I have stated. This is the first time I've heard him come out and say this. He said, we will cut them off entirely. Well, how do you do that? Because so far, they haven't done it. The next city, especially after, well, there's another city, I forget what it's called. I want to say Zaporizhia over to the west, that they would have to take too, right on the Dnieper River. But they've got to get over there. But the next step after that, and they've already crossed over, is Nikolaeva. They already have everything from Zaporizhia on that side, but not the city of Zaporizhia. That'd be the next big chunk, which is in Zaporizhia. Now, the west of that is Nikolaeva, and then a little southwest of that is Odessa. And Odessa is a big sea port, historic Russian importance. Odessa on the Black Sea has been a Russian port, naval port even. Sevastopol is the main one down there, but as a big port city. But this is the first time he has said that this is where we could cut them off from the sea entirely. So if you want to take that as a threat, again, you can do that. And he ends with a warning to Kiev and those that are standing behind Kiev. Think hard about whether you really want to continue this practice of attacking peaceful ships carrying sunflower oil, to some foreign port in the neutral waters or economic zones of third parties. This is bad stuff. This is like, in my opinion, the U.S. blowing up ships that are boats that are leaving Venezuela. This is just dead wrong, no matter how you slice it. You don't blow up first and ask questions later. The diplomacy has got to occur, not firing upon non-military vessels, whether you think they're carrying drugs or sunflower oil. I frankly happen to agree with that. So he did say, think hard about whether you really want to continue this practice. We're going to come back to those tankers if we have some time. It's the Kairos and the Virat, and there's a couple others later in the show, because that story is bigger than just two hulls and a bunch of insurance paperwork. But that was the end of the Putin presser. And I spent quite a bit of time on that, but I wanted you to hear exactly what he had to say. And because they never tell you, and they don't tell you the reason why. They don't tell you anything behind it. Over here, you get a cup. All you would have got from that entire presser, if it was somebody other than me, is, oh, gee, Putin's threatening to blow up civilian ships, or, oh, gee, Putin says, he's going to destroy, other cities. Well, there's a huge explanation behind that, and behind what he says. And you were never going to get rid of this war unless we listen. But nobody listens. In fact, nobody tells you the real story to listen to. I appreciate you listening to me here on Damn Radio. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. Feel free to call in at 573-746-8020. Today is the biggest day in radio, and for Damn Radio. And tell you again, after me, we have Damn Schwag, Gabby Hayes. No really big show today. JR's got an appointment. The show will return to its regular time tomorrow. Search for Solutions 4 to 6, and then the Ike Skelton Radio Show, which I like to listen to. Good stuff. Well, I wanted to cover a little bit. Maybe I'll skip forward here and go to those ships, because I think those ships are important. We had the Aristovich, the guy who talks about, the former Zelensky aide. There was a good show that he put out yesterday too. But I think I'm going to go to the Shadow Fleet, the dangerous game that's being played with these ships. The Kairos, the Virat, in this dangerous game. So let's talk about the tankers and piracy in more of concrete terms. Who and what was hit? So in the past few days, 2 tankers associated with Russian sanctions evading oil have been hit in the Black Sea, both inside Turkey's exclusive economic zone. So they hit the Kairos, which is an old tanker operating under, a flag. It's linked to carrying Russian crude, allegedly circumventing Western sanctions. And the Virat's another tanker of the same general profile. But both were well, depending on which side you listen to, both were empty at the time. Which doesn't make sense to me, because if you're going to attack them, why would you attack them empty? One of them was allegedly carrying sunflower oil, or was supposed to put, but who knows there's been various reportings. They were moving to Novorossiysk to load oil when they were hit by Ukrainian naval drones. The Kairos caught fire. The crew had to be evacuated by the Turkish Coast Guard. The Virat was damaged but stayed afloat. A third tanker, the Mid-Volga II, which was, this is the one I told you about yesterday, carrying sunflower oil to Georgia, was attacked in the Black Sea off the Turkish coast. So these are 3 attacks. Nobody died, but the point wasn't to ship a sink full of people. The point was to send a signal to the Russian trade to raise insurance and risk premiums. Now, remember, the insurance and risk premiums have almost exclusively, worldwide, been controlled by Lloyd's of London. So the difficult part of shipping is to get insurance coverage for the myriad of things that can happen when you are transporting things by ship internationally, storms, all of that. So a lot of times people won't do your shipment if you don't have the right insurance paperwork, because a ship could be carrying many products from many different places, and everybody has to be insured, and all their products have to be insured. That's part of the game. Well, several years ago, especially after the start, and remember, this is part of the BRICS countries as well that I talk about frequently on this show, is that the insurance has to be covered from somewhere. And BRICS, and China especially, they have started their own insurance. And people are this is what the war is really about. You know, is all of the control that London and New York have controlled forever. A little bit of the other capitals in Brussels or Berlin that people have controlled, and now China is rising and is providing some of the insurance and some of all of that. So when they talk about damage to this, they're trying to damage the entire system-wide part of this. Okay. And this is raising insurance and risk premiums to attack Russian stuff. They want to make it more expensive to be a Russian supplier, and they want to move the war into a new domain. This war is moving up. This is now, according to France, an economic war, and we're going to destroy. And by the way, it's a dirty economic war. So, and Ukraine has no problem being dirty. You know, they're dirty, they're corrupt. They will happily do this. They will, the elites, if you want to call them that, of Ukraine have no problem killing people. They have no problem destroying things. If they have no problem. They justify this. The end justifies the means. So if you want to destroy Russia, and that part of that is taking out a pipeline on the bottom of the Baltic Sea, that's no problem. We should do that. And Joe Biden will back us up, right? So, we're Ukraine. We'll do that. You want to blow up ships? Oh, yeah, we hate Russia. So we hate Russia. Therefore, we can blow up their ships, and if a few people die, same thing. I feel the same way about the Venezuela nonsense going on right now. I might do a full show on that, or maybe some more commentary on it later in the week. But right now, this is about the escalations going on from the West to keep this war going, whether economically or on the ground, and destroy more Ukrainians, because, we have to fight to the last Ukrainian. And then France is already talking about boots on the ground from France. Not good. Why is Turkey important in this if the war is entering into a new lane? Because of what I just told you is Istanbul and the Straits of Bosphorus. This is a big deal. If you're going to be putting some of that, you're going to have that economic war, you got to start blowing up crap. And where do you blow it up? You blow it up where it is. Where is it? Straits of Bosphorus. They got to go through Turkey to get Russian product out the south way. So from Ankara's perspective, in this economic zones, none of this happened in Russian waters, not in Ukrainian waters, but this is Turkish exclusive economic zones. This is the area where Turkey claims economic rights, and they're very I don't know. They try to keep they protective. They're very protective of these rights that they have. So Ukraine is carrying out armed attacks against ships in a third country's backyard. So whether or not Russia owns those ships, Turkey has to worry about environmental damage if a tanker is loaded and gets hit. Tourism damage. Tourism. Istanbul is a huge tourist location. The mosques there are unbelievable. It's a beautiful city. And, oh my God, the shopping, the seaside, what we have in America does not compare. I strongly recommend a trip to Istanbul if you get the chance. And so environmental, tourism damage, security damage. So foreign powers, getting their ships blown up or attacked in Turkey is not a good look for Turkey either. They're using their waters as a shooting gallery. That's crap. Turkey has called these incidents a dangerous escalation and is allegedly talking to NATO and others about Black Sea security. Putin called it piracy and a justification for perhaps expanding strikes on Ukrainian port infrastructure, like I told you before. So we have a shadow war. This is a war of NATO and the U.S. against Russia, a shadow war being conducted with Ukrainian bodies and killing off a generation of men. In fact, several generations of men, because the average age is like 47. And maybe higher by now. And there, I heard a report yesterday that 140,000 just in the last couple of months, young men have run to Europe from Ukraine because they're afraid that the 18 to 25-year-old exemption, which they haven't mobilized anybody in that age, you can only volunteer if you're going to be that age. Everyone else is 26 or older. And so that's why you have an aging force, and that's why they don't have enough people. But all the young men are running. So whether it's war, whether it's departure from the city, you got nothing left in Ukraine. They've lost half of the population at least. So now it's shadow fleets versus shadow war. So these ships, the Kairos, the Virat, and others, have been described as part of Russia's shadow fleet. They're old tankers bought up by closed companies and foreign countries that flag them with flags of convenience, is what the West likes to call them. So people can buy you can, like here in the West, everything gets flagged as a ship in Panama. Lots of the ships are Panama for a lot of financial reasons. Well, they do the same thing on the other side of the planet. To get through the Bosphorus, maybe you need a little bit of a different flag, and so they reflag them. But we do the same over here. And they operate without Western insurance. They're buying their insurance on the Chinese market, which is growing, and they're not using Lloyd's London, and they're used to move Russian or other sanctioned countries, Iranian oil. There's no formal legal category really called a shadow fleet, but that's what they mean by it. It's a political label. It's a way for the West to say, well, these ships are bad. They're transporting sunflower oil from Russia, so France can call them bad ships, and Ukraine can attack them in a third party's economic zone. They can attack them, hopefully not kill anybody, but disable them so they can't operate. And, nobody likes that. So it's a way for the Western government to say these ships are bad and for Ukraine to justify attacking them. But they're not breaking any maritime law. We do it all the time over here. The shadow fleet, you get to attack these ships because the only reason, because they're carrying Russian goods. That's just as bad as claiming that narco terrorists on a ship that you could stop, that you get to blow them up. I'm strongly against this. There is zero justification. It's only an escalation, and if it continues, it's going to cause serious problems. This Venezuela thing is not going to end well for Trump. It just won't. And I'm not here to talk about that today. We're going to keep on going. But Ukraine has gone a step further, physically attacking ships in a third country's economic zone, just like the U.S. is attacking ships outside of Venezuela to engage in regime change. It's not a legal brief, by any stretch. But what they're doing is blowing up stuff and making sure that everybody in the world knows they're blowing it up, just like Trump is doing in Venezuela. So it's they torpedo these things. They make sure it's caught on video. They post it all over Telegram so people pick it up, just like the U.S. is doing in Venezuela. And they're doing it to engage in terrorism, get rid of somebody. That's what's happening. The way I see it, there is zero justification. Call them narco-terrorists, fine. Stop them, arrest them, punish them. You don't kill them without a trial. That is BS. And you can't, oh, gee, it's wartime. We have a drug war. Drug wars aren't conducted by blowing up countries. Nonsense. But that's, we're very willing to do that sort of thing. So basically, you have a shadow fleet moving oil, a shadow war in the Black Sea blowing them up, and a NATO country, Turkey, caught in the middle. Nuclear power, Russia is talking about cutting off Ukraine's access to the sea completely and target ships of other nations if it continues. Now that is a scary threat. But who's escalating it? People that are blowing up ships in Russia's shadow fleet. And the corollary is we're blowing up ships in the West. This is leading to World War III if it continues. This is BS, no matter how you slice it. This is the kind of escalation that doesn't look too dramatic on CNN. Nobody talks about it. There's no big explosion with famous buildings or things in the background, but they're all on video, and you can see the tanker limping. They like to show that, but they don't want to talk about dead people. We only do that here on the West. We blow up the ship completely. With the Shadow Fleet, they're only disabling these ships to affect the economic fortunes of Russia. But it changes insurance landscape, it changes shipping routes, and it's a huge risk. It changes the risk calculus for the world. Let's take it back to the presser on what Putin said. He calls these sorts of attacks piracy. He talks about expanding the strikes on port facilities, and he raised the possibility of retaliating against ships that are aiding Ukraine. He's talking about doing the same thing. How many do you get blowing up ships in international waters? America. How many do you get, Ukraine, blowing them up in the Straits of Bosphorus? How many do you get before somebody retaliates? How many do you get before China, India, other people take more serious notice and do something about it? Now, nobody will in the West, no, it'd be, I don't think we're making any friends with what we're doing in South America, just like Ukraine isn't making it. In fact, Ukraine is losing friends by what they are doing. So the most radical part of this is it's the continual escalation. There's a guy named Alexei Aristovich that I like to watch as well. He used to be an advisor to the Z Monster, and all of his advisors are now ex-advisors. Everybody's gone. Yermak the other day, gone, fired. That's been a drama scenario that I've been following for a little bit. Apparently there were shouting matches when Yermak was fired, and the Z Monster. I think Z Monster's next on the list. They've already gotten rid of everyone that that has worked with him, that rose with him to this power, and he's next. And prediction, Zelensky, who has been sent back to Kiev, while Z-Man is not there. That's interesting development. Might want to keep an eye on that. So I watched a little bit of the Aristovich show, and he does every couple of days. He does like an hour and a half and gets interviewed, or he has another political talk with another guy. And so what did he say? He's a Ukrainian insider. And in this conversation, he was talking about if Zelensky leaves, how does that affect the pace of the peace process? Now, I believe this putting Zelensky in place is an effort to, on the part of the EU, continue the war and the grift and the extraction of money, to keep the money train flowing, to keep the corruption flowing, because they won't change the system in Ukraine. They'll just change the players. And it's clear that this is all political. You have to get rid of the Z Monster now. Russia can't sign a deal. Think about this. If Russia cannot sign a deal with Zelensky, which they cannot, if they can't sign because he's illegitimate, Russia won't do it. They can only sign it with the West. Like I told you yesterday, they're now saying, because it's enshrined in Ukraine's constitution, that they're looking to the West and want to be a NATO member, that Witkoff was pumping to Putin yesterday that, well, we'll just make it a NATO agreement with Russia that Ukraine will never be admitted. That way, it doesn't matter what those idiots in Ukraine do. We'll take care of it without them. We'll force NATO to make an agreement. Now, Russia doesn't believe anybody anyway. Like I've talked about this before. Russia never got in a treaty from George Bush 1 that NATO will not go another inch to the east, but they backed off and shut down the Warsaw Pact when he said that. It was preamble to the agreement that actually was signed. You know, Budapest Memorandum, Budapest Accords, all the destruction of the Warsaw Pact. And what happened immediately after? The U.S., NATO immediately went after all those former Soviet satellite countries to suck them into NATO and continue eastward expansion to get Russia. So Russia won't just, bend over here. They're not going to. And so that is how and why. Russia won't agree to anything with the Z Monster, and they might get something done if it's Witkoff in the U.S. coming to the agreement. But Aristovich says, the discussion they were having was, if Zelensky leaves, how will that affect the pace of the peace process? He had a little bit different change. They even had a little bit of a poll for the viewers. Will it speed things up? Will it create chaos? Will it change nothing because it's all scripted anyway? Or will Zelensky cling to power like, the dying gasp of a man, which I believe the 3 and 4, Zelensky's trying to cling to power right now. He brings home the bacon, $150 million. He grifted off of Ireland yesterday. He gets a battle, give him another week. You know what I mean? But I don't believe anything changes because all this is scripted anyway, and has been from the beginning. And Aristovich is trying to be more blunt about it as well, at least since he was, sacked from Zelensky inner circle several years ago. But he believes that the most likely outcome is not Zelensky reading a dramatic "I'm tired, I'm leaving" speech and signing peace himself. He thinks that Zelensky leaves, but he disagrees with me, says that someone else will sign a peace agreement. Zelensky can't sign a peace agreement. He's been pumping war for so long and grifting for so long and being a beggar for so long that he can't do anything about it. But why does Aristovich thinks that Zelensky leaves and somebody else signs peace, which I admit is another potential outcome. But I think if it's Zelensky being pushed in by England, that's a big continue on for another year or so, mainly with NATO funding. But Russia was going to continue to advance and take some bigger cities because, truthfully, the front for Ukraine is collapsing anyway. It's getting worse. They can't bring people in, and all the stuff that we know and I talk about is making it even worse for their mobilization efforts. They don't have anybody left to mobilize. They're into the sick and afflicted and the old right now. And they can't or won't go any younger and take the 18 to 25-year-olds. So all of them have left the country anyway. And so, but he said Russia doesn't want to sign with Zelensky. And why would they? They have been saying he's illegitimate and on principle. They will not sign something with Zelensky, but a signature has to happen. So that means there's going to be a different name on the bottom line. So he talks about the near final state of the draft deal, and that's what's going to happen. And in his telling, there are two main sticky points in this 28-point peace plan. Territorial concessions, or will Ukraine voluntarily withdraw from the remaining parts of Donetsk, or will the front line be frozen where it stands? There isn't going to be Russia backing off. Russia isn't going to capitulate. But that's what Ukraine's been pumping forever. We want them to capitulate. Well, the winners don't capitulate. That's just how it goes. You don't capitulate if you're the winner. Well, I won. Okay, that was great. I think I'll back off. That ain't going to happen. So NATO is in the Ukrainian constitution, Aristovich reminds us, and so will Ukraine remove that NATO membership clause from its constitution and replace it with neutrality and promise not to join any military alliance? And what he says is, this is what Aristovich is expected to bring to Moscow. We haven't heard all of those things yet. I'm sure there's things in the news that I might be able to get to here, either in the final bits of this show or certainly tomorrow. A package where, but Aristovich says that Witkoff is bringing a package where those two issues are clarified or at least negotiable, and Moscow will respond to that. In this whole game, the name at the top in Kiev matters less than the decisions being made on territorial losses or gains by each side and NATO. And Aristovich is a pretty brutal guy anyway. He says, whoever replaces Zelensky, Zaluzhny, some parliament figure, whoever, will inherit all the political costs of either signing something that looks like a defeat or refusing to sign and continuing the war. I say that's what Zaluzhny will do. They will have continued loss and perhaps then the total collapse of the Ukrainian army. And Zelensky won't be to blame because he will be retired to a villa in the south of France or England. And if the successor, whoever that may be, says no concessions and we keep NATO in our constitution, the war continues and the blame shifts from Zelensky to the new guy, especially if it's Zaluzhny. And then the new leader is responsible for frontline collapses, drone shortages, corruption in defense, the loss of cities like Pokrovsk, Krasnoarmeysk, and everything else. He believes, Aristovich believes, the Americans are determined to reach a deal now. And I think Trump has been pretty clear about that, whatever the deal is, and will apply pressure accordingly to both sides, it looks like. political pressure, financial pressure, and maybe personal pressure. I watched another commentator talk about America removing military intelligence. I've said forever that that's very important, and apparently that is getting close. That the U.S. is slow playing in military intelligence even now. Now, I don't know the truth of that, but it is being talked about. Aristovich describes a scenario where Zelensky is given a personal guarantee that he won't die if he steps down, and that he gets to keep all his money and no one's going to jail him. Now, I listened to another thing yesterday that part of the things in Brussels, they're saying, this is the EU, is saying, oh, geez, America, we can't agree to anything unless we still get to prosecute Vladimir Putin for war crimes. But we don't want, everybody else is off the hook. There's no corruption scandal. There's nobody chased for all the money that's disappeared. None of that. But Putin, boy, that guy's guilty of war crimes, and we got to get him. There aren't any war crimes committed by Ukraine inside Kursk, inside, what is it? Darn it, I can't remember the name of the city. Right next to Kursk and just north of Sumy region, but I forget the name of it. And all of the stuff that's been going on there, the bombings in those places, and the destruction of civilians in those places. What took place between 2014 and 2022 inside the Donbass when Ukraine was killing Russians because they speak Russian, or killing people that they disagreed with, and all of that. The only one that matters is to the EU is going after Putin, right? And so Zelensky gets personal guarantee to step down. Those guarantees will unlikely hold. They won't hold any long term. And he says that Zelensky is no longer going to be little Churchill. They were trying to claim at the beginning of this that Zelensky was out wandering around looking like Churchill. I never thought that. I thought he looked like a beggar the whole time, and it was nonsensical. But on the system side, Aristovich made a point that lines up with what we heard from what the Russians said. And this is important. He says Russia doesn't actually care whether Ukraine remains corrupt and internally rotten. And unfortunately, that's going to continue if they put Zelensky in there. What Russia cares about is its own security on the southwestern axis. So, according to Aristovich, Moscow's priority is to limit Ukraine's capacity to be used as an anti-Russian battering ram, not to reform Ukraine's internal politics. Now, they want that, but it's more important to get the security. And so he says the West, and this is Aristovich, this is a Ukrainian commentator. He says the West, especially Europe, does not care about Ukraine or its corruption. They're tired of seeing the billions stolen by somebody else. They're tired of seeing they want to steal it themselves. They want their own corrupt chunks, my percent, my part for bringing the deal together, whether you call it a broker fee or bribery or, a mafia. It's the same old people doing the same thing. EU's own prosecutor's office is now looking to massive fraud involving European aid on the European side. So this corruption isn't just Ukraine. Ukraine is the worst of it, for sure, but there's corruption everywhere, and the EU is looking into it as well. So he kind of ends up in a rather strange place. Russia wants security guarantees to its southwest. America wants a deal signed to end this war, and they don't care what it costs anymore. Europe wants some kind of clean money laundering scheme through Ukraine. They want, they would rather be a little more clean about the openly corrupt activities inside of Ukraine. They want to be able to hide it like they always have been through places like U.S. Agency for International Development, National Endowment for Democracy, and others. They the money laundering used to be pretty clean. You could send it through and take your 10-20% off the top of this aid that you organized, and nobody would notice. You could give yourself a position running this what do they call them, the NGO, and you could give yourself a big position, pay yourself several $1,000,000 a year, and that isn't considered theft or thievery. That is considered having a good job and managing a good process, but they pay themselves millions. And this is how the grift and the scam continues. And if we can keep Ukraine in that, we don't care if Ukraine milks off the top 10 to 20% or whatever we send there, long as before we send it there, we get to milk off our own 10 to 20% or give ourselves jobs that pay off in the same amount and make it look cleaner. So Aristovich is saying that Europe wants a clean, less openly corrupt Ukraine. So Ukrainian politicians, all they want to do is save themselves, the share of the money that they've been able to pull off, and their own political futures. And somewhere in that mess, according to Aristovich, the war will grind on until somebody, probably not Zelensky, takes the risk of signing something that his own voters, that Ukraine will consider somewhat of a betrayal. That the Ukrainians will see that, you've been lying to us from the start. You've been saying, we've got the backing. Even yesterday in Ireland, I don't know if he's prime minister or what. I forget. I did watch it, but I didn't remember what it was, what his title was. The guy that gave him 150 million, though, to the old Z monster yesterday, he said that we're with you until the end. But then he said, even if it means, rebuilding. So after you collapse, basically, here's 150 million. Enjoy your 10%, 20% first. And then, but here's 150 million from the people of Ireland, and, good luck. And we're with you till the end. Well, what is the end? Nobody knows. So, but that's Aristovich. And he always has a reasonably interesting show. He's a little hard to listen to because he's, like so many Russian men, mumbles when he speaks. He doesn't open his mouth or enunciate fully, at least in my opinion. So he's hard to listen to. I usually got to have subtitles on with him to try to catch a quick view because he talks so fast and mumbles a lot, or not clearly. You may not like Aristovich. You may not even trust him, and he used to be a lot more relevant than he is now. But he isn't talking like a YouTube cheerleader for Ukraine. There's too many of those. He's talking like a man who sees a wall coming. You're going to hit this wall, and he's trying to describe it and what it is. And I think it was a pretty interesting show, no matter how you talk it, and some good commentary. So I've given you some real news from Vladimir Putin in the beginning, a real look at these shadow fleet attacks and what they mean, and a little bit about what inside Ukraine people in the know are saying. This corruption isn't going to just end, friends and neighbors. It's not going to just go away. And before we wrap up, and I've got one of my favorite Christmas songs lined up to get out, and I was always when I was a kid, I grew up went to high school in Minnesota. And don't you know, they talk like don't you know, and they would say things like, you want to come with? What does that mean? And I remember even in high school, said somebody'd go, hey, we're going to the movies this Friday. You want to come with? And I'd say, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Want to come with? You can't end a question or end a sentence with. You know, it's you want to come with. You want to come with me to somewhere. You want to, you want to speak English. But they would say things that, don't you know? You throw it, and one of the things was A at the end of everything. I remember when I was a kid in high school, you'd talk about A, and don't you know, and so one of my favorites was Bob and Doug McKenzie. Do you remember that from? I think it was called SCTV, and the movie was called Strange Brew. They did a movie, and then they had their famous was with Geddy Lee from Rush, and it's remember that? And they would do that. That song is coming up here pretty soon before we finish up the show, and that'll be entertaining for us. And I've only got a little bit of time before I got to kick that on. So you've been listening to Damn Radio, an international flavor, and I'm damn glad that you have been. I'm here every day now from 7:30 to 9 instead of the 9 p.m. to 10:30 slot. I'm now the morning guy. There's a lot of news going on, but we're not going to get to it because I got to get this song out of the way, and I'm still learning how to make sure that it works correctly to get her done. But I think I will get her done just correctly. So listen to my shows. All of them will be downloaded and taken care of at internationalflavor.com, and you can listen to Madame Radio / podcasts. Thank you.